Hey! How's it going? It's my 50th birthday today. I made it. So today I'm going to make a video that looks at 50 years of life from the point of view of a recovering alcoholic with 16 years of sobriety. And I'm going to tell you how I'm just beginning now to figure out how to be happy. Hi, I'm Cams. I make content about life after addiction from the perspective of someone with Asperger Syndrome, attention deficit disorder, and multiple bouts of medicated depression. Putting down the bevy was just the beginning. It was followed by a whole bunch of bad behaviours that weren't immediately apparent. That's what I talk about here, as well as sharing some of my music and some of my hiking adventures that I do because they enhance my sobriety by reminding me that we are all one. This could get quite long, so if you will indulge me, this is a chance for me to indulge myself. You know, if you can't indulge yourself on your birthday, when else can you, right? So I'm going to start off by talking about Asperger Syndrome. This is something that came to light when my son was diagnosed in 2012 at the age of 5. So we'd gone over to the hospital for a consultation, and he was asked a series of questions, and the consultant diagnosed him with Asperger's Syndrome. But during the consultation, he also asked me some questions, and he talked about our family history. And he basically said that I have it too, and so did my dad. It seems to be something that affects the male line. And so when I heard that, it answered so many questions. Honestly, it was like one of those light bulb moments, you know. So I mention that because it's fundamental to the rest of my story, and I've only had that knowledge for 9 years. So I was already sober for 4 years when I got that information. So as I said, light bulb moment, and I look back at my life now from that lens, or through that lens, and I see how when I was at school, I was so badly behaved. I was constantly on behaviour chits and being suspended and being sent to detention and being sent outside the class, and my academic performance was pitiful. And in my last year, I remember trying to leave school before I went into 5th year, but I wasn't allowed because my birthday, well, as you know, is in October. So I had to complete 5th year, which was just ridiculous, and I ended up basically not going to school hardly ever at all, and I came away with a higher in woodwork. So at least I had that. Now, those behavioural problems were, I would imagine, a result of my Asperger Syndrome, about which I knew nothing at the time. And before that, I had started drinking. Now, growing up, I'd always wanted to be on my own. It was something that, as far back as I can remember, was a thing for me. Not being in company, being on my own, reading books, trying to escape from life. And, you know, my mum tells a story, or sorry, rest in peace, my dear mother. She told the story that I used to go missing and they would find me in my cot, having climbed in myself and pulled the covers over me. And then I would disappear to the library. That was my favourite place, where I would sit and hide, read books and escape from reality. Now what's interesting to me is that I had a really, really good group of friends.
He walks, he talks.
The cat with the hat.
He's going to the colour for a few hours.
Many of them I'm still friends with now. And that kind of goes against the grain a little bit of what I've read about Asperger's Syndrome and about my enjoying my own company, you know. So I had an amazing group of friends all through school. They did get their exams though, and I didn't. So make of that what you will. We started drinking quite early on. All of us, really, my little group of friends. Around about the age of 11 or 12. I can't remember exactly, but it's going to be then because that's when I got into the high school. And then we had our first drink when we camped out at the high school rugby park and got some Merry Down cider, some cans of Terence Lager, put up tents, and that was the first time I really got drunk. And I remember at the time thinking, oh my God, this is amazing. Why did no one tell me about this? And it felt like I had arrived. And so that pattern continued through my early teenage years into late teenage years. And eventually the blackouts started to become a feature of my drinking. And that carried on and got worse and worse and worse through the years. So at the end of high school, I came out at the age of 16 with one hire in woodwork and then joined the army. Oh, this hill. I love it and I hate it at the same time. 195 metres. June 1988, I jumped on a train bound for Harrogate to join the Royal Corps of Signals as a radio telegraphist, intake 88B. What's a radio telegraphist? I actually don't know, and here's why. All the apprentices when joining had to sit a language aptitude test. And it turned out I had an aptitude for languages, about which I knew absolutely nothing. Now remember the previous section where I talked about my academic record, okay? No language skills at all. In fact, no academic skills of any kind, at least so I thought. So I sat the test. They said to me, would you like to become an electronic warfare operator? I was like, oh, that sounds sexy, what is it? They said, well, all we can tell you is that you'll have to learn intensive Russian for 2 years. Okay, I said, what's the job? Well, we can't tell you the job because it's intelligence. I was like, nah, count me out. So I went home on my first leave after basic training, where my dad just happened to be working for a former Royal Signals soldier, somebody who had also been part of the intelligence wing of the Royal Signals. And he said, this guy would like to have a chat with you. So I went round to his house, had a chat with this guy, and he was like, he said, you've just been offered the golden goose here. If you don't take this, you're a fool. And even if you biff out, you can go back to being a radio telegraphist. So you've got nothing to lose. So I was like, okay, I'll do it. And so when I went back to Harrogate, I discovered that they'd already decided for me that that's what I was going to be doing. Such is the British Army. Now what I discovered in the army at the age of 16 was that I was actually quite a good team player. I was good with the discipline. I didn't excel, but I also didn't biff out. You know, I was kind of under the radar, just doing okay, you know. And of course there was no drinking because it was basic training. Did we smoke then? I think we were allowed smoke breaks. So I had actually started smoking fags by then. And I remember at the end of our basic training we got what's called a squadron smoker, where it was basically a party to celebrate getting to the end of your basic training. So we did that, and then I went home on 4 weeks leave where, as I said, I met this guy who persuaded me to switch trades. And so I did. I switched trades. I went back to the Harrogate and was back squadded because there weren't enough people in my intake to do the Russian class. So I ended up having to wait for the next intake, and I joined 88C. Now, it turned out they were right. I did excel at the languages. I did really, really well in all my exams. I didn't struggle at all. I found it actually fun, would you believe? And not only did we do Russian, we did science and maths and other things, voice procedures and BATCO, that's cryptography, stuff like that, typing, all sorts of things that, for some reason, in that environment, I began to excel. Now, I don't know whether this is a failing on my school's part, but I think now in the cold light of day, at the age of 50, when I look back, I have to say that the school really did play a big part in my failure at school. I mean, obviously I put my hands up and, you know, take it on the chin that I played at least 50% of that part as well. But the school, honestly, when I see how the school here on Arran is handling my son's problems, and I compare that to how it was for me back in the day, it's like night and day. Here's the thing that, again, doesn't quite fit the mould in terms of Asperger's, is that I had an amazing group of friends all through 88B/C and then into 89B. Wait a minute, 89B? Why were you in 89B, Cams? We'll get to that. I made amazing friends, some of whom I'm still in touch with now. And in fact, I bet you there are at least 2 who are watching this right now. How are you doing? Then came the thing that changed my life. At the age of 17, out on exercise in the Lake District, an exercise called EL Canoe. We went out in July 1989 with canoeing, hill walking, orienteering, and here's what happened. So, EL Canoe, 1989. I made a video about that on the 30th anniversary, which was 2019. You can watch that here. It got a pretty good response, and at the time of making it, I kind of came to the conclusion that that accident was kind of responsible for a lot of my mental health issues later on in life, including the drinking, some drugs, that whole thing. It was a traumatic event which, you know, gave rise to PTSD. I'm quite sure of that now when I look back. So I'm not going to go into all the details of that. I'm just going to say that that was a turning point for me, and that was when I ended up coming out of the army as a result, because I was no longer able to meet the fitness requirements, despite the fact that the army had assured my mum and dad that they were going to keep me in because I was excelling at the academic side and the physical side wasn't such an important thing in terms of the job that I was going to be doing. But I never actually got to learn what the job was, because I finished my training in Harrogate, which for some bizarre reason they allowed me to finish. So I finished my 2 years at Harrogate with a year in between where I was in recovery and undergoing, I don't even know how many surgeries. I think the last count was 14. So I came out and I was still on the army payroll. I went back to high school and I got myself some hires. I was at school for 2 years. I went back to my old high school and I went to Ayr Academy as well, where I did higher Russian, English and history, and ended up getting into the University of St Andrews in Scotland. Another way that my addictive nature used to manifest itself was in video games. You know, going down to the Broadway arcade at lunchtimes from school, going down after school, going there on Sundays, skipping Sunday school and spending my collection money. And that building there, that kind of Art Deco building behind me, in a state of disrepair, that was the amusement arcade, where I spent a great deal of my youth playing Donkey Kong and Moon Patrol, Legendary Warrior. Must have spent a fortune in that place. I remember my dad coming in pulling me out in front of everybody. I was in the middle of a game of Rygar, Legendary Warrior, which I could complete. So, you know, you'd be like 45 minutes with 110p. But, you know, that was escapism for me as well. And then came home computers. I remember getting a VIC-20, Commodore VIC-20 for Christmas around about 1981. And then moving on to the Sinclair ZX Spectrum. So I was always disloyal. A bit like now, I run Windows and Mac, even today. So back then it was Commodore and Sinclair. I was like, it still makes me chuckle. But yeah, I carried on with the gaming. As I got older, never had consoles, but I used to get into the PC gaming and used to hang out with mates and play their PlayStation and Nintendo, Mario Kart. I remember my son, who's also a mad gamer, when we got Mario Kart and he fired it on and I blew him away. I mean, I can't do it now, but when we first loaded it up, he was like, what? And you know, I see the exact same behaviour in my son. He's actually worse, I think, than I was. But it's that kind of all-encompassing focus on one particular thing to the exclusion of everything else. And so if we call him for his dinner or to go to bed or whatever it might be, it's like the end of his world, you know? And I don't know what to do about that. What I did about it for myself was I quit. I told my wife, when would this have been? 2002, something like that. She used to buy me games for my Windows 98 laptop. I think it was even before XP. And I told her to stop. I think the last game she bought me was Max Payne, which again, I would disappear and end up sitting into the wee hours of the morning playing it. So I told her to stop and I basically quit gaming, which I think was a good move. So we're about to head off to St Andrews, but let's talk about drugs first a bit, because they do come into it. So, it'd be 1989, I came out the surgery in Prestwick, getting prescribed some painkillers, which would have been DF118s, which then became known as dihydrocodeine, which is the good stuff, right? And I came out of there and bumped into a guy I knew from school. He was a year above me at school. Rest in peace, Gav. So bumped into Gav, and I mean, I was quite a well-known character in my hometown because, you know, I'm wandering about with metalwork sticking out my leg and all that. It was like, you know, everybody knew the guy with the leg, right? So met Gav and I was like, yeah, I've just been in for some painkillers, it's pretty sore, you know. And he was like, well, why don't you come round to my bit for a wee blast? Wee smoke of the hash. It was like, aye, alright. So I did, middle of the afternoon, went round to Gav's bit and we sat there while he played guitar, and I think we put Neighbours or something on the telly and I got stoned and I was like, this is alright. This is actually really good. And that's where that began. So it was the 90s, early 90s. So 1990 it must have been, now that I think about it. And so Acid House was kicking off, it was a crazy time. And because hash was illegal, you had to meet dodgy characters to score. So I got to meet some dodgy characters and ended up, because I was getting my painkillers on repeat, I could get as many as I wanted pretty much. That's what I mean, it was a crazy time. I don't think it would be like that now, but I would get the bottle of pills and then I would swap them for hash. I'd probably be getting an ounce at a time at that point and then divvying it up with my pals. So that's how I got into kind of dealing, I guess. If the cops were to catch me, that's probably what they would pin on me. Although I wasn't, you know, hanging out in street corners or anything like that, punting it to school kids, but I was providing for my friends, which then carried on all the way through St Andrews. I mean, I don't think there was a day at uni where I wasn't stoned, and I was going to lectures stoned. My whole uni career was like that. And because it worked as an analgesic, it felt okay. And the drinking by that point was starting to get much worse. I was getting into the whiskey in a big way. I was enjoying gin. I remember failing my driving test and sitting down the beach with a bottle of gin in the afternoon. And I was still finding that the alcohol and the drugs were helping me to socialise, to fit in, all of that stuff. But interestingly, I think, is that I still had a really good group of friends, even when I got to uni. Once I'd got over that initial phase of growling at everybody, which I'll get onto in a minute. Once I made some actual friends, I mean, this is 93 when I started St Andrews. I'm still friends with a lot of them now. So yeah, I was never wanting for friendships, which is interesting. So here we are at St Andrews University, Fife, east coast of Scotland. Now when I was in the army, remember I joined at 16, so everybody I'd joined with was the same age, either 16 or 17. So none of them could have gone to university, none of them had probably even finished high school. And so in that small subset of people, you know, my level was a little bit higher than most, and so I excelled, you know, and by which I mean I was on top of everybody else. And that kind of gave me a false sense of my own capabilities. And when I got to St Andrews, it was a different kettle of fish. Like, I mean, I remember sitting in my higher history class between army and St Andrews, where I was having to write essays, and my essay writing was abysmal. And I remember my history teacher telling me that it wasn't I done that, it was I did that. And I remember being like, no, it isn't it? What are you talking about? So that's how bad my grammar was, you know, despite the fact that I had graduated from the Army Apprentices College with the Commandant's Prize for Best Russian Linguist.
Telecommunications Operator Linguist Prize, won by Chris Campbell from Haywood.
So I got to St Andrews and I was with a completely different set of people. These were people who had finished high school, right? And so when I went into that class for the first time, it became apparent very, very quickly that my Russian military vocab was not going to stand me in good stead in a university Russian class. And it didn't. At the end of first year, I was the only one in my class who had to take the exams. Everybody else had got an exemption because their coursework was so good. Not only was my Russian not up to scratch in terms of the class I was in, my essay writing was abysmal. I was having to write essays on Russian literature. I'd never read any literature in my life. I was a fantasy book guy. And here I was having to read this highfalutin 19th century stuff that just made no sense to me whatsoever. And my writing was dreadful. So somehow, by hook or by crook, I got through first year, into second year, and the same again, into third year. But during that time, as I said, I was smoking a lot of hash, I was taking a lot of painkillers, and I was drinking a lot of whiskey. And I was going to the pub a lot, and I was blacking out a lot. So it's not really a recipe for doing well at uni, you know what I mean? So the feelings of low self-esteem and not fitting in were becoming part of my life at university. And then I went to Odessa. I spent my gap year. It was like a 5-year degree with a year in the middle. So it was 2 years of uni, gap year, 2 years of uni. So I went to Odessa in Ukraine, which you can watch a video all about up here. That was kind of where I started drinking, I would say alcoholically, you know, particularly where straight vodka was concerned. And the low self-esteem really went into fourth gear, I think, when I was there. I felt like my Russian was so poor. I'd been wasting my time, what was I doing, all that stuff. Not to mention a love affair which had crashed and burned and left me smarting pretty bad. So I got through it, and now when I look back on that year, I'm incredibly grateful that I had that opportunity, and I would love to go back and visit someday. But anyway, back to uni, into my second 2 years, and came out the end. I'm not going to go into lots of detail about this. I came out the end with a 2-1, which was pretty good. In fact, it was one of the biggest achievements of my life, I would say. Now, I'd always held people in really high regard who had degrees. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that I had them on a pedestal because it seemed so unattainable to me. It was like something that other people did. And here was me coming out of a prestigious university in Scotland with an upper second class degree. It was like, holy shit, you know? And that really put a bounce in my step. So during those second 2 years, it was the first time I'd been diagnosed with clinical depression. So I'd been put onto antidepressants and beta blockers for anxiety. And it wasn't a great time, but I got through it, and that stayed with me. You know, I always remembered the darkness and hoped that I would never feel it again. So I came out of St Andrews with a spring in my step, a 2-1 under my belt, a degree in Russian, language and literature. What was I going to do next? Well, I ended up going to Bradford Uni to do a Masters in Translation and Interpreting. And that's where I met my wife. Now, when we met, I had decided that I was going to quit drinking, I was going to quit smoking, I was going to go swimming every day. So for the first month or so, during my Bradford Uni degree, that's what I was doing. I wasn't drinking, I wasn't smoking, I was going swimming. And I guess my girlfriend thought that that's who I was. And I mean, it is who I was, who am I kidding? But she didn't know about the drinking, so that's when I began to get sneaky. Even at the beginning of our relationship, I would be getting sneaky about smoking hash, about getting drunk. I'd be going home to visit my school friends and getting drunk during the holidays, and then abstaining during class time because I didn't want to be judged too harshly. But I think it's because I secretly knew that I had a drinking problem, and it just slowly got worse and worse and worse as our relationship went on. And I ended up finishing Bradford, and we went to Russia together to teach English at a school in Sochi. So I'm back on the Black Sea coast as I was in Odessa. This time we're together though, and she's getting to see my drinking. I mean, in Russia, hanging out with other colleagues from the school and all of that, it's like, it's such a great place to drink, honestly. It's as good a place to drink as Scotland, except much, much cheaper. So that's what happened, and she got to see it, and we got to know each other much better because we were living together, we were working together, all of that stuff. And during that time, a job became available in Kazakhstan as a translator. So I ended up getting that job and going to live in Kazakhstan for 1.5 years. And while I was there, my drinking got worse and worse and worse. Again, like Russia, very, very good place to drink, particularly when you're on an expat salary living in a third world country, which, I mean, it was, it's probably not now. I was in Almaty, which was a big city, but It wasn't like it is now. I mean, I've been looking at YouTube videos and I see it now looking very cosmopolitan. But in 2000, 2001, it wasn't like that. I mean, it was a pretty nice place, but it was a great place to drink, that's my point, which is what I did. And that was where I attended my first AA meeting, was when my wife came out to visit. We weren't married yet at this point. She came out to visit, she stayed with me for, I think it was a couple of months. And she got to see a couple of times what my drinking had become. And she got concerned, you know, she was like, no, I think you should do something about this. Now by that point I had actually started reaching out to people, my mum and dad, some friends that I knew, and my mum and dad were just like, nah, you're not an alkie, you just like a bevy like your pals, nothing wrong with that. You work hard, you play hard, it's fine. I was like, thanks mum and dad. But no, that wasn't the truth. It was not the truth. So I ended up calling AA, got in touch with a couple of guys, a couple of Americans who invited me to a meeting, and I went along to their flat one Sunday and was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous and the Big Book. So that was the beginning of my attempted recovery, let's call it, because it didn't stick. You know, as soon as my wife left, I stopped going to these meetings and I went back out again and picked up from where I left off and carried on for, let's see, 2001, got sober 2005, so another 4 years. Left Kazakhstan, moved in with my girlfriend in Luxembourg, got married in 2002, blacked out at my wedding, don't remember my wedding night at all, woke up the next day still wearing all my wedding gear. So there's that. And, you know, carried on drinking till 2005. So, yeah, that was fun. So I got to AA 2005, September. My last drink was October 2005, so I had a slip. I'm not going to go into the whole of AA and how it works and how it worked for me, etc., because I've done that a lot on my channel, so you can stick around and you'll see some of that content, and I'm sure I'll be talking more about it at length as my channel grows. So if you have any questions about that, you know, feel free to ask. I'd be more than happy to answer. Suffice it to say that AA worked in as much as I didn't drink again. So it's been since October 2005, so I just passed my 16th anniversary, which I made a video about here, you can watch that. And so here we are. I'm going to jump forward a lot right to today and talk about some of the mistakes I've made and what I've learned and where I am today, because I'm learning as I get older. I'm learning about the power of the present, or the power of now, which is a book I'm reading right now by Eckhart Tolle. And I'm coming to understand that fear, I mean, I've always known that fear has run my life in a very big way since forever. And I think that's part of what happened when I got to St Andrews, is that, you know, I think I'd got so used to being top of the class when I was in the army that when I was no longer top of the class, I didn't like that, you know, and that's the ego getting in the way. This is what I'm learning from the power of now. So the fear kind of took over my life in a big way, and it resulted in pill addiction. It resulted in poor eating, poor exercise, self-sabotage, all these bad behaviours that weren't apparent at the time, you know. And one of the things I did was I got a new job. I moved to the Isle of Arran in 2008. I bought a post office, which I thought was going to be an idyllic life, running an island post office, you know. When I applied, my wife was like, what are you doing? This is not you at all. And I was like, sure it is, sure it is. As always, she was right. It wasn't me at all. And I kind of got trapped in that job. And it started to change me. It started to turn me into someone that I didn't like. And someone that lots of other people also didn't like. I got a bit of a reputation as the grumpy postmaster. And rightly so, because I was. And even though I didn't like it and I made videos about it and talked about how I wanted to change, I never did. And that all changed. I mean, we put the post office up for sale. It was like 7 years before it sold. And when it did, nobody was more surprised than I. I did not expect to sell it. I thought it would still be there now. And eventually we would have to give up our investment. But I don't know, my higher power at work or circumstances, I don't know. But it did sell, October 2019. And since then, I tried a social media marketing business, which wasn't really me because I'm not much of a marketer. And then I started my YouTube channel. Now this was one of the life-changing things that has happened to me in recent years, was starting to make content about my recovery, which came about kind of by accident when I joined Ali Abdaal's part-time YouTuber academy, which we could ill afford, but it's something that I really wanted to do. So the first homework assignment was to create a video about something you love, because, I mean, everyone can do that. It's a pretty straightforward assignment, right? So I made mine all about the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. So you can watch that there. It received a lot of praise from my classmates. Now bear in mind, I'm wary of praise when I think back to the competitive days of my Russian classes in the army, etc. You know, pride comes before a fall and all of that stuff. But the reception that it got showed me that there's an audience out there for recovery content, but more importantly, it really helped me to make that content, and that's why I've continued. And it has now been a year since the first cohort of the Part-Time YouTuber Academy, and in that year I have grown in quite a big way. You know, I've got to a stage in life where I know who I want to be, and I think I know what I need to do to become that person. And it's not just Ali Abdaal's class, it's also August Bradley's class. He ran a course at the same time as Ali Abdaal called Pillars, Pipelines and Vaults with Notion. And I thought I was signing up for a class that would teach me how to use Notion to build a life operating system that would help me to achieve my goals and become successful. But the reason I signed up was not because of the technical side of how to run a Notion page or how to build a success. Well, actually it was, yeah. So it wasn't about the Notion page, it was about August Bradley's way of explaining systems thinking and positive mindset or growth mindset. These are things that, you know, in 5 years ago, I would probably have said weren't for me. Affirmations and mindset practice, meditation, all of these things. But I've come to understand that there is a lot of power in energy, and this system is helping me in a very, very big way to become whole. So one of my recent conclusions about sobriety is that it means much more than just putting down the drink, right? No more bevy, that's brilliant, excellent, we're sober now. Well, are we? So I'm trying not to use the word sobriety now to mean not drinking, because it means so much more to me. It means wholeness. So becoming whole by practicing being present, and by setting my life in such a way that enables me to work towards my guiding principles, which are love and kindness. That's really it. And when I see people on YouTube finishing videos going peace, or, you know, Ringo Starr and George Harrison and all their peace and within, without you, all of these things that were meaningless to me and in fact in some cases annoyed me, they've now become part of my life, and I can see why these little phrases can really help to keep your mind focused on, or not your mind, let's say, to keep my mind focused on what's really important, which is love and kindness and peace and harmony. These are simple concepts, and the concepts which I'm now aware are actually there all the time, and it's we who cover them up with day-to-day stress and fear and anxiety and all of these negative things in our lives which we can choose to let go. That, my friends, is sobriety, and that's how I'm planning my life now in order to grow into becoming that person. I've been behaving badly for such a long time that the patterns are ingrained, the default behaviours are ingrained, they're natural, instinctual and quite frankly harmful. So it's going to be a lot of work, you know, and this is where making content can help. Talking into a device on a stick about these important issues is helping me massively to becoming a kind and loving person. And I hope that it helps some of you out there who are watching this. I mean, this has been, I admit, a self-indulgent ramble for my 50th birthday. Of course, you know, I get that. But if this is the kind of content that helps me, then surely there must be someone out there who is helped by listening to me ramble as a 50-year-old white man in Scotland who's looking to become the best version of himself. You know, it doesn't need to be complicated. It's just life, you know. It's life. And so I'm going to continue with the Power of Now. I'm only halfway through, and already it has been incredibly instructional, educational, and you can expect a video to drop on that when I finish the book. If I can come up with a good review of that book and explain what it means to me, then maybe that will be inspirational to you as well. Who knows? So, I've got one more thing to talk about, and that's going to be in the living room, so I'll see you through there. So the last thing I want to talk about is something that's really positive. Something that happened when I was recovering from the accident at the age of 20. I bought my first guitar. This is not it. Bought my first guitar from Beggars Music in Silky Hall Street after seeing a Bert Jansch documentary when I was lying on my bed at home with a plaster on my leg, probably some metalwork sticking out. And you remember I said that I met my friend Gav, who introduced me to the smoking, the hash. Well, that afternoon, sitting in his bedroom, listening to him playing the guitar, was like, yeah, that sounds really nice. Why don't I do that? And so when I saw the Bert Jansch documentary, where he played the tune that I just introduced, in fact it's probably playing right now over this little clip, so I should stop doing that. It was a really positive thing, and I jumped into it with both feet. I got into it deep, and I used the music and the guitar playing as therapy. So that's something I've continued to this day. And that's one of the most amazing things that's ever happened to me. I mean, I often wonder, what if I'd started playing guitar younger, but you know, life's too short for what ifs. So I'm just grateful that I did make the decision that day to go and buy a guitar, and that it's been a constant companion to me through all these years. I've travelled the world with my guitar, I've met many people all around the world. I still travel regularly to guitar gatherings where I meet with other players, and it's just one of the most wholesome, therapeutic, mental health beneficial things that I could ever possibly do. So that's a really positive note to mention at the end of this video that's been a bit rambling. I hope you've managed to get something from it. The other really positive thing, and this is perhaps even more positive in a kind of mental health way, is that over the last couple of years here on the Isle of Arran, I've been getting out into the hills. So as I'm sure you'll imagine, you know, falling off a cliff at the age of 17 and having that life-changing accident, it leaves its mark, and it makes getting into the hills a bit of a scary event. And so I'll finish this by saying that this year I got out to one of the scariest, or one of the most technical parts of the northern mountain range here on Arran, a place called Cwmnaceli, or the Witch's Step, which is a natural V-shaped gully on a ridge. And I was too feared to go myself, so I hired the services of a local lass called Lucy. She's a mountain leader, a freelance mountain leader, and she took me up to the Witch's Step. And when we got there, I mean, I'll drop a picture in here and you can take a look, but when I got into the V-shaped gully and I looked down, it looked exactly like the gully that we were climbing when I had my accident. So it did bring back some ghosts. And that was immediately followed by a scramble where Lucy took me around a rock face with a drop behind me. And there was a moment when I was like, I don't know if I can do this. But I did, and I felt amazing after it. So I'm very grateful to Lucy for taking me up there, because she doesn't take everybody, and she knew that I was probably going to go anyway. So those are the two things that really have been the biggest help to me in terms of my mental health, is the music and the hill walking. Peak number 3, Ben Lewis. It's all downhill from here. So there we have it, folks. The life of a 50-year-old recovering alcoholic. If you've got to the end of the video, thanks so much. It means the world to me that you would spend some time watching me tell my life story. I'm going to be publishing a lot more content along these lines, along spiritual lines, including some guitar content as well, with live streams now and again, sometimes Friday nights, that's a good time. Lots of hiking content, maybe when the weather picks up, and maybe even during the winter, we shall see. But I've enjoyed making this video a lot, and I hope I can get it out today on my birthday, because that would make it special. And to all my friends who joined me last night for my video Zoom call, thank you for coming. All my fellow part-time YouTuber Academy friends, it was amazing. And I thank you all for spending some time with me last night and celebrating my birthday. So all that remains now is for me to finish the video and go and enjoy my day. So I wish you all the very best, and I'm looking forward to the next 10 years of growing into the person I would like to become. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye for now.